The bride cried in pain, "Make it fast." The cowboy responded with calm words. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly, as if the small rural town itself was holding its breath. The sun rose slowly over open fields and dusty roads, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pale blue. Birds moved from fence to fence, and a gentle wind carried the smell of earth and wild grass. It was the kind of morning people remembered for years, not because something loud happened, but because everything felt heavy with meaning. The bride woke up before anyone else in the house. She lay still on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of movement outside. Somewhere, a rooster crowed. A cart rolled down the road. Life was going on as usual, yet her own life was about to change forever. She placed one hand over her chest and took a slow breath, trying to calm the tight feeling inside her. She was not a woman who cried easily. Life had taught her to stay quiet, to carry pain without showing it. From a young age, she had learned that complaining did not change much. People in her town respected strength, and she had built her strength slowly, through loss, long days, and silent nights. Still, this morning felt different. It was not fear exactly, and it was not regret. It was something deeper, a mix of pressure, memories, and unanswered questions. The wedding dress hung on the back of the door, simple but carefully made. It was not expensive, but it was clean, pressed, and chosen with care. Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the fabric. She thought about her mother, who was no longer alive to help her get ready. She thought about her father, who had agreed to this marriage with a heavy heart but firm belief that it was the right thing to do. In this town, marriages were not only about love. They were about stability, respect, and shared responsibility. Outside, the house slowly filled with quiet activity. A neighbor arrived to help. An aunt whispered prayers under her breath. Someone placed flowers in a small jar. Everyone moved gently, as if afraid that loud sounds might break something fragile. The bride let them help her, nodding when spoken to, smiling when expected. No one noticed how tight her fingers curled when she sat alone for a moment, or how her eyes filled with thoughts she did not share. Across town, the cowboy was already awake and dressed. He stood outside the small barn where his horse waited, brushing dust from his boots. His movements were steady and calm, the same way they had always been. People often described him as quiet, but it was not the silence of a man who had nothing to say. It was the silence of someone who chose his words carefully. He had lived most of his life working the land, fixing fences, and helping neighbors when help was needed. He was known for keeping his promises, even when they were difficult. This wedding was one such promise. It was not a sudden decision, and it was not made lightly. He understood the weight of it, and he respected it. As he prepared, he thought about the bride. He did not know her deeply, but he knew enough to sense her strength. He had seen the way she carried herself, the way her eyes held more than they showed. He respected her for that. He also knew that this day might not be easy for her. That thought stayed with him as he mounted his horse and began the slow ride toward the church. The church stood at the edge of town, small and old, with wooden walls that had seen many weddings, goodbyes, and quiet prayers. People gathered early, speaking in low voices. Some smiled, some watched closely, and some simply waited. Weddings in this town were community events. Everyone felt a part of them, whether invited or not. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of wood and flowers. Light came through the narrow windows, creating soft patterns on the floor. The bride arrived just before the ceremony was set to begin. As she stepped inside, every eye turned toward her. She felt the weight of their expectations settle on her shoulders. She lifted her chin slightly and walked forward, each step slow and careful. The cowboy was already standing at the front. When he saw her, he did not rush or smile widely. He simply met her eyes and nodded, a small gesture that somehow felt grounding. For a brief moment, the noise of the room faded. It was just the two of them, standing in a place where words would soon shape their future. As the ceremony began, the familiar words filled the space. The officiant spoke clearly and calmly, his voice steady. The guests listened, some with genuine hope, others with curiosity. The bride stood still, her hands folded in front of her. At first, she focused on breathing, on keeping her thoughts quiet. But as the words continued, something inside her began to shift. Memories rose without warning, long nights of worry, moments of loss she had never fully shared, decisions she had made because there seemed to be no other choice. The future stretched before her, unknown and heavy. Her chest tightened and a dull ache spread through her body. She told herself to stay strong, to get through this moment like she had gotten through so many others. The cowboy noticed the change before anyone else did. He saw the slight stiffening of her shoulders, the way her breath shortened. He did not move, but his attention sharpened. He knew that strength did not always look like standing tall. Sometimes, it looked like holding on when everything inside wanted to break. As the ceremony went on, the bride's discomfort grew harder to ignore. It was not something that could be seen clearly, but it was there, pressing against her. Her thoughts raced, then slowed, then raced again. The room felt smaller. The voices sounded distant. She felt caught between what was expected of her and what she truly felt. She glanced at the cowboy, unsure why she did so. Perhaps she was looking for reassurance, or perhaps she just needed something solid to focus on. His expression was calm, unchanged. There was no judgment in his eyes, no impatience, just presence. That alone eased something in her, even if only slightly. The guests remained unaware. To them, everything looked normal. Another wedding, another step in the cycle of life. They did not hear the thoughts racing in the bride's mind or feel the weight pressing against her heart. They did not see the quiet understanding forming between the two people at the front. As the officiant paused briefly before continuing, the bride swallowed hard. She knew this was a moment that would define much of her life. She did not know yet how it would unfold, only that something inside her was reaching its limit. The cowboy stood beside her, steady as the ground beneath their feet, ready in his own quiet way to face whatever came next. The morning that had begun so peacefully now carried an undercurrent of tension, unseen but powerful. The town waited, the words continued, and the story of this wedding moved forward, shaped not only by tradition, but by the unspoken emotions that filled the space between two people standing at the edge of a new beginning. The ceremony continued, but time began to feel strange. For the bride, seconds stretched longer than they should, and every word spoken in the church echoed inside her head. She stood there, dressed in white, surrounded by people, yet she felt completely alone. Her hands, folded neatly in front of her, had grown cold. She pressed her fingers together gently, hoping the small movement would help her stay grounded. At first, she told herself that this feeling would pass. Many brides felt nervous, she reminded herself. Many felt overwhelmed. But this was not just nervousness. It was heavier, deeper, like a door inside her had opened without warning, releasing years of quiet struggle she had kept locked away. Her breathing became shallow. She focused on the sound of the officiant's voice, but the words blurred together. Promises, duties, futures, all of it mixed into one long sentence she could barely follow. Her heart beat faster, not with excitement, but with a growing sense of pressure. It felt as if her body was asking her to slow down, to stop for just a moment, but the world around her kept moving forward. She remembered other moments when she had felt this same pressure. Standing at her mother's bedside years ago, holding her hand and pretending to be strong. Signing papers she did not fully understand because trusted elders said it was necessary. Saying yes when she wanted to ask questions, because asking questions often led to silence or disapproval. She had learned to endure, to move forward even when her heart lagged behind. A faint ache spread through her chest and down her arms. It was not sharp, but it was persistent. She shifted her weight slightly, hoping no one would notice. The room felt warmer now, though nothing had changed. She could hear her own heartbeat louder than anything else. Under the veil, her eyes filled with tears she did not plan to shed. She blinked slowly, determined not to let them fall. Crying in front of everyone would invite questions, and questions would invite attention. Attention was the last thing she wanted. She wanted this moment to be over, not because she hated it, but because she felt she could not hold herself together much longer. The guests watched quietly. Some smiled softly, touched by the seriousness of the moment. Others whispered silent prayers. From the outside, the bride looked calm, reserved, even graceful. No one could see the storm forming beneath the surface. The cowboy stood beside her, his posture steady. He kept his gaze forward, but he was aware of her in a way that surprised even him. He noticed the small changes, the way her shoulders tensed, the way her hands trembled just slightly. He sensed that something was wrong, though he could not name it exactly. He did not interrupt or draw attention. He simply remained present. As the officiant spoke about unity and commitment, the words struck something raw inside the bride. Unity sounded beautiful, but it also sounded heavy. Commitment sounded honorable, but it also sounded final. She wondered if she was ready not for marriage itself, but for everything it symbolized in her life. Responsibility, expectations, a future shaped as much by others as by herself. Her vision blurred for a moment. She lowered her head slightly, pretending to listen closely, while inside she struggled to steady herself. She felt a sudden wave of discomfort pass through her body, leaving her weak. It scared her. She had always trusted herself to endure, to push through. But now, standing there, she felt closer to her limit than she ever had before. A single thought repeated in her mind, just let this be over. The officiant paused again, waiting for the next response. The silence felt loud. The bride swallowed hard. The ache in her chest returned, stronger than before. She knew she needed to say something, but she did not know how to explain what she was feeling. Words felt too small, too slow. What came out instead was a quiet plea spoken without thinking, carried by exhaustion rather than intention. Make it fast. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but it was clear enough for those closest to hear. A few guests shifted in their seats, unsure if they had heard correctly. Someone smiled awkwardly, thinking she was joking or simply nervous. To them, it was an understandable comment, a sign of wedding day anxiety. But for the bride, those words carried much more. They were not about the ceremony alone. They were about the pressure, the pain, the long road that had led her here. They were about wanting relief, even if just for a moment. As soon as she said it, she felt a rush of regret. She worried she had said too much, that she had broken some unspoken rule. Her heart raced again. She kept her head down, waiting for the moment to pass. The cowboy heard her clearly. He did not smile or look surprised. Instead, his expression softened just a little. He understood that her words were not careless. They were heavy. He did not know the full story behind them, but he knew pain when he heard it. He had lived long enough to recognize the sound of someone reaching their limit. The officiant cleared his throat gently and continued, choosing not to pause on the comment. The ceremony moved on, but something had shifted. For the bride, the room felt even smaller. For the cowboy, the moment became more serious. The bride tried to regain control. She focused on her breathing again, counting each breath silently. In and out, slow and steady. She told herself that she could get through this just as she had gotten through everything else. Still, the discomfort lingered like a quiet warning she could not ignore. She felt tears slip down her cheeks, hidden by the veil. She hoped no one would notice. Crying was not a weakness, she knew that, but she had spent so much of her life being strong that allowing herself to be seen like this felt unfamiliar and frightening. The guests remained largely unaware of the depth of the moment. To them, the ceremony was nearly complete. Soon there would be congratulations, food, conversation. Life would move forward as planned, but for the bride, time slowed again. She felt as though she was standing at the edge of something unknown, unsure whether to step forward or ask for a pause. She did not ask. She stayed silent, trusting that the moment would pass. Beside her, the cowboy remained steady. He did not reach for her hand or speak out of turn. He respected the space she seemed to need. Still, his presence felt different now, less distant, more attentive. Without saying a word, he made a quiet decision to be patient, whatever came next. As the ceremony neared its end, the bride's discomfort eased slightly, though the emotional weight remained. She lifted her head again, straightened her shoulders, and prepared herself for what was to come. She did not know yet that this moment, this quiet plea spoken in pain, would shape the path ahead in ways she could not imagine. For now, all she knew was that she had been heard by at least one person. And sometimes being heard, even silently, was the first step toward something better. The ceremony moved toward its final moments, but the space between the bride and the cowboy felt changed. Something invisible yet powerful now existed there, formed by a few quiet words and the understanding behind them. The bride kept her eyes forward, but her body still carried the signs of strain. Her shoulders were tight, her breath careful, as if she were afraid that one wrong move might cause everything inside her to spill out. The officiant spoke the last lines with a calm and practiced tone. The words were familiar, repeated at countless ceremonies before this one. To the guests, it sounded like a conclusion. To the bride, it felt like standing still while the world decided her direction. She listened, but her mind drifted between the present moment and the many years that had led her here. When the final words were spoken, there was a short pause, a pause that felt longer than it truly was. In that space, the bride felt the weight of her own body, the floor beneath her feet, the air in her lungs. She told herself to stay steady. Just a little longer, she thought. Just get through this part. The cowboy turned his head slightly toward her, careful not to draw attention. He did not speak yet. He did not rush. He simply watched her face, reading the small signs she could not hide. He saw the tension around her mouth, the way her jaw clenched as if holding back words or tears. He understood that whatever she was feeling did not disappear just because the ceremony was ending. As the guests began to relax, some shifting in their seats, some smiling more freely, the cowboy leaned just a little closer. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and steady, meant only for her. "There's no rush," he said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried weight. They were not loud enough for anyone else to hear. They were not meant to interrupt or challenge tradition. They were meant to reach her and only her. The bride blinked in surprise. She had not expected him to speak, not now. For a moment she wondered if she had imagined it. Then she turned her eyes toward him just enough to see his expression. It was calm, unchanged, but there was something gentle there as well, something patient. Her chest tightened again, but this time the feeling was different. It was still heavy, but it was not as sharp. His words did not solve everything. They did not erase her pain or confusion, but they created space, and space was something she desperately needed. The officiant announced the completion of the ceremony, and a soft sound of relief moved through the room. People began to stand, smiles spreading, quiet conversations starting. The bride remained still for a moment longer, as if her body needed time to catch up with what had just happened. The cowboy stayed beside her, not pushing her to move, not pulling her forward. When she finally took a step, he matched her pace without thinking. Slow, careful, respectful. As they walked down the aisle together, the bride felt every eye on them. She kept her head up, her expression composed, but inside she was still processing everything. The moment she had whispered those words, the moment he had responded, replayed in her mind again and again. Outside the church, the sunlight felt brighter than before. The fresh air touched her face, and she took a deeper breath than she had all day. People gathered around them, offering congratulations and kind words. She smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, but she did not speak much. She needed quiet even among the noise. The cowboy noticed this and stayed close, answering questions when necessary, giving her time. He did not explain her silence or make excuses. He simply allowed it. After some time, the crowd thinned slightly as people moved toward the next part of the celebration. There was food to prepare, tables to arrange, small tasks that kept everyone busy. The bride found herself standing near the edge of the gathering, watching from a distance. The cowboy joined her there. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. The sounds of laughter and conversation filled the space between them, but they stood in a quiet bubble of their own. "You don't have to pretend," he said at last, his voice still calm, still low. She looked at him, surprised again. "Pretend?" she asked softly. "That everything is fine," he replied. "If it is." Her first instinct was to deny it, to say she was okay, to return to the familiar role of strength and silence. But something about the way he spoke made that feel unnecessary. He was not demanding an answer. He was offering understanding. "I didn't mean to say that," she said after a pause. "During the ceremony, it just came out." "I know," he said. She studied his face, trying to see if there was judgment there. She found none, only patience. "I wasn't talking about the words," he continued. "I was talking about how you felt." Her throat tightened. She looked away, afraid that if she met his eyes again, she might lose control. "I don't usually say things like that," she admitted. "I usually keep things inside." He nodded slowly. "I figured." That simple response surprised her. He did not ask why. He did not push her to explain. He accepted her words as they were. They stood there for another moment, watching people move back and forth. The bride felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, uncertainty, and something close to gratitude. She had not expected this day to include understanding. She had expected duty, responsibility, and silence. "I just needed it to end," she said quietly. "The moment, the pressure. Not everything." "I know," he said again, just as calmly. She let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. For the first time that day, her shoulders relaxed slightly. She felt tired, deeply tired, but not as alone as she had felt earlier. "I won't push you," the cowboy said after a while. "Not today, not ever. We'll move at whatever pace you need." She turned to him fully now. "You don't even know me," she said. He smiled faintly. "I know enough to know when someone is hurting." The honesty of that answer stayed with her. She did not respond right away. Instead, she looked back toward the gathering, the people, the life that waited beyond this moment. It all felt overwhelming, but it no longer felt impossible. As the afternoon went on, they rejoined the others. The bride spoke a little more, ate a little, smiled when it felt natural. The discomfort did not vanish, but it softened, made bearable by the quiet support beside her. The cowboy remained the same throughout the day, steady, observant, calm. He did not draw attention to himself or to her. He simply stayed present, stepping in when needed, stepping back when not. As the sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ground, the bride realized something had changed inside her. Not her situation, not her responsibilities, but her sense of being alone in them. She did not know what the future would bring. She did not know how their lives together would unfold. But she knew this. When she had whispered her pain, someone had answered with patience instead of pressure. And sometimes that was enough to begin again. The celebration slowly began to quiet as the day moved forward. People drifted away in small groups, carrying leftover food, exchanging final good wishes, and returning to their routines. By the time the sun leaned low in the sky, the space around the bride and the cowboy felt calmer, almost empty. The noise that had filled the day faded into distant sounds, leaving behind a gentle silence. They stood together near the edge of the yard, unsure of what came next. The bride felt tired in a way that went deeper than her body. It was the kind of tiredness that followed long emotional strain, when holding everything inside finally began to loosen its grip. She watched the light change across the land. the field stretching wide and open, and felt a strange sense of pause settle over her. The cowboy noticed her quiet again, but this time it felt different. Earlier, her silence had been tight and guarded. Now it felt thoughtful, as if she were sorting through things that had been waiting a long time to be faced. "Do you want to sit for a bit?" he asked gently. She nodded. They moved toward a wooden bench under a large tree not far from the house. The shade was cool and a light breeze stirred the leaves overhead. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet did not feel uncomfortable. It felt earned. After some time, the bride spoke, her voice low but steady. "I'm sorry if today didn't turn out the way people expected." He shook his head slowly. "It turned out the way it needed to." She looked at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "Most people don't see it that way." "I'm not most people," he replied. That made her smile just a little. It was the first smile of the day that came without effort. She rested her hands in her lap and stared at them, tracing the lines on her palms as if they held answers. "I don't talk much about my past," she said after a pause. "Not because it's a secret, just because I never felt there was space for it." He waited, giving her time. He did not interrupt or urge her on. "My mother was strong," she continued. "Strong in the way people admire. She worked hard, kept the family together, never complained. When she got sick, she didn't complain then either. She just kept going until she couldn't." Her voice wavered slightly, but she kept speaking. "When she was gone, everyone told me I had to be just like her, strong. Quiet, responsible. I tried, I really did." The cowboy listened closely. He did not look away and he did not soften his attention. He understood that listening was not passive. It was work. "I learned early that showing pain made people uncomfortable," she said. "So I stopped showing it. I thought if I carried it quietly, it would eventually disappear." She let out a small breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "It didn't," he nodded. "It usually doesn't." She glanced at him, grateful for the honesty. "This marriage," she went on, "it wasn't forced, but it wasn't free either. It felt like the next step I was supposed to take, like something decided before I had the chance to ask what I wanted." "What do you want?" he asked softly. The question caught her off guard. She had not expected it. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her brow furrowed as she searched for an answer. "I don't know," she admitted. "No one has asked me that in a long time." "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to know right now." She studied his face again, still looking for signs of pressure or disappointment. She found none. Instead, she found patience. The kind that did not rush answers or demand clarity before it was ready. "I was afraid today," she said quietly. "Not of you, of everything else." "I know," he replied, "and I'm glad you said something, even if it came out rough." She nodded. "When you spoke to me, when you said there was no rush, it felt like someone finally slowed the world down." "That's all I was trying to do," he said. "Give you space." They sat there for a while longer, the breeze moving gently around them. The bride felt lighter, not because her problems were gone, but because they were no longer trapped inside her. Speaking them out loud had given them shape, and shape made them easier to face. Eventually she stood and brushed dust from her dress. "We should probably go," she said. "People will wonder." "They already are," he said with a small smile. "But they can wait." As they walked back toward the house, they moved side by side, not too close, not too far apart. The bride noticed how natural the pace felt. There was no pulling, no pushing. Inside the house, things were quieter now. A few family members remained, cleaning up, speaking softly. The bride greeted them with calm words, answering questions simply. She did not feel the need to explain herself. For the first time in a long while, she trusted that she did not owe everyone an explanation. Later that evening, as the sky darkened and stars began to appear, they found themselves alone again. Lamps cast a warm glow across the room, softening the edges of everything. "I want to be honest with you," the cowboy said. "I don't expect anything from you tonight, or tomorrow, or until you're ready." She felt a knot loosen inside her. "Thank you," she said. That means more than you know. I can guess, he replied. She hesitated, then spoke again. I don't know what kind of partner I'll be. I'm still figuring myself out. He nodded. We all are. Anyone who says otherwise is pretending. That made her laugh softly. It felt good to laugh without guilt. I'm not promising perfection, he continued. I'm promising patience. She met his eyes. That's enough for now. As the night deepened, the bride reflected on how different the day had become from what she had expected. It had begun with pressure and silent pain. It had moved through fear and confusion. And now it rested in something quieter, steadier. She knew challenges lay ahead. Conversations still needed to happen. Decisions still needed to be made. Healing did not happen in a single day. But she also knew she was no longer facing it alone. When she finally lay down to rest, the house quiet around her, she felt tired in a gentler way. The kind of tiredness that followed honesty rather than endurance. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, and allowed herself to rest without guarding every thought. Outside, the land stretched wide under the night sky, unchanged and steady. Inside, something new had begun. Not a perfect story, not an easy one, but a real one. Built not on rush or expectation, but on calm words, listening, and the slow, careful work of understanding. And for the first time in a long while, the bride felt that this beginning, though imperfect, might be strong enough to hold her. Morning arrived quietly, without the weight that had filled the previous day. The light slipped through the window in soft lines, touching the walls and the floor with a gentle warmth. The bride woke slowly, not startled, not tense. For a moment she lay still, listening to the sounds of the house and the land beyond it. Birds called from the trees. Somewhere far away, a gate opened and closed. Life was moving forward, steady and calm. She sat up and took a deep breath. Her body still felt tired, but it was a clean kind of tiredness, not the heavy strain she had carried before. The memories of the wedding day came back to her, not as sharp flashes, but as a quiet sequence of moments. The pressure, the words she had whispered, the calm reply she had received. She placed her feet on the floor and stood, feeling grounded. In the kitchen, the cowboy was already awake. He stood near the counter, pouring water into a cup. When he saw her, he did not rush or speak right away. He simply nodded, as if to say that the morning was hers to enter at her own pace. "Did you sleep?" he asked after a moment. "Yes," she replied, "better than I expected." He smiled faintly. "That's good." They sat at the small table sharing a simple breakfast. There was no awkward silence, no forced conversation. They spoke about ordinary things, the weather, the work that waited outside, the quiet of the town. It felt strange to her how normal it all seemed and comforting at the same time. As the day went on, they began to settle into a rhythm. The cowboy went out to tend to his work, checking fences and animals, doing the tasks he knew well. The bride stayed inside for a while, then stepped out into the open air. She walked slowly, taking in the space around her. The land felt wide and honest, without walls or expectations. It reminded her that life did not have to be rushed to be meaningful. Later, they met again near the porch. She watched as he worked, his movements steady and practiced. There was no hurry in him, no need to prove anything. That steadiness made her feel safe in a way she had not expected. "I was thinking," she said carefully when he finished and joined her, "about what comes next." He nodded. "So was I." "I don't want to live by other people's plans anymore," she continued. "I don't want to disappear into what I'm supposed to be." He listened closely. "What do you want instead?" She thought for a moment. "I want time. I want honesty. I want to learn who I am without fear." He considered her words. "Then that's what we'll aim for." She searched his face. "You're sure?" "Yes," he said simply, "because I want the same things, maybe in different ways, but still the same." That answer stayed with her. It did not promise perfection or ease. It promised effort, shared and steady. Days turned into weeks. Life did not change overnight, but it shifted slowly. The bride began to speak more, not only to him but to others as well. She asked questions she had once kept silent. Some people were surprised. Some did not understand, but she no longer felt responsible for meeting every expectation placed on her. The cowboy stood by her quietly through it all. He did not fight her battles for her, but he did not leave her to face them alone. When she needed space, he gave it. When she needed support, he offered it without conditions. They talked often, sometimes late into the evening, sometimes while walking across the fields. They shared stories of their pasts, not all at once, but piece by piece. He spoke of his own losses, of the years spent working without complaint, of learning patience the hard way. She listened, realizing that his calm had been earned, not given. There were difficult days, moments when old habits returned, when silence felt safer than truth. But now those moments did not last as long. They had learned to pause, to breathe, to speak before pain turned into distance. One afternoon, as they sat together watching the sky change colors, she said, "I don't feel trapped anymore." He looked at her. "Good." "I still don't know where everything is going," she added. "That's all right," he said. "Neither do I," she smiled at that. For the first time, uncertainty did not scare her. It felt like space instead of danger. The town slowly adjusted as well. People noticed the changes, the quiet strength growing between them. Some whispered, some nodded in approval. Over time, most simply accepted that this marriage was different. It did not follow the old patterns exactly. It moved at its own pace. The bride grew stronger in a new way, not the strength of silence, but the strength of choice. She learned that saying no could be kind, and that asking for help was not a failure. She began to take part in decisions that shaped her days, her work, her future. The cowboy watched this growth with quiet respect. He did not take credit for it. He knew it belonged to her. His role was not to lead her forward, but to walk beside her. One evening, months later, they stood together under the open sky. The air was cool and the stars were bright. She thought back to the wedding day, to the moment she had whispered her pain, believing she was asking for an ending. "I thought I was asking for everything to be over," she said softly. "And now?" he asked. "Now I see I was asking for a beginning," she replied. He nodded, understanding. They stood there in silence, not the heavy silence of fear, but the peaceful silence of trust. The past had not disappeared and the future was still unknown. But the present felt solid, built on patience, listening, and the courage to move slowly. The bride no longer measured her life by how well she endured. She measured it by how honestly she lived. And the cowboy, with his calm words and steady presence, remained beside her, not as a rescuer, not as a ruler, but as a partner. Together, they had chosen a different path, one that did not rush pain away but faced it gently, one that did not demand strength but allowed it to grow naturally. And in that choice they found something rare and real, a life shaped not by pressure but by understanding, and a love built not on speed but on care.